Hello. Before I start, I have to mention the context in which this paper was written. Since the end of last year, I'm working at Erlangen University, maybe as a first professor with a focus on digital art history. But for the following, these two partners are more important. Björn Ommer, with whom I collaborated for a long time at Heidelberg University, and Leo Impet, we heard before, from the EPFL Lausanne, with whom I work intensively for 1 year by now. To go into iconography, I choose two major Christian iconographies. Here shown in examples of the Frick collection, the Annunciation on the left and the Baptism. Both scenes are comparable because of their concentrated plots, with two protagonists interacting and a heavenly intervention taking place. Already, the comparison of these two pictures needs iconography to understand their same origin from the Gospels, the dove as Holy Ghost, and to name the persons as John, Mary, Gabriel, and Christ. For Erwin Panofsky, iconography means a second level of understanding. The first level is a simple description of the forms, the objects, and the figures, in the sense of mid-aged man with glasses. This level is comparable with object recognition and computer vision. The second level is a semantic enrichment, which is based on knowledge about the cultural context. For example, we know that this man on the photo is the scholar Erwin Panofsky, the angel in the painting is Gabriel, and the subject is an annunciation. It is important to mention that there's a third level of understanding which goes further. Iconology reconstructs the cultural history of a representation and connotations far from the normal visual perception and far of the current scope of computer vision. The narrative and Christian examples we are dealing with can be defined as concrete scenes, normally situated at one location, represented with a limited group of characters. These iconographies describes a short time span. They are mostly based on textual sources and are hardly singular. For the life of Christ, the textual source is binding, which means representations cannot obviously deform the content without being heretic. Thus, the gospel text is kind of the crown truth of any representation. Every iconography includes thousands of images, so the whole corpus of Christian iconography reaches a scale appropriate for neural networks. Nevertheless, we have various images and developments through nearly 2,000 years. The comparison between a sarcophagus from the late antiquity, representing the adoration of the three Magi, and a late medieval painting by Konrad Witz with the same subject shows the diversity of iconography. The three uniform Phrygian Magi transformed to three kings, different in age, origin, and costume. Poses, interaction, and composition completely changed. The example shows how challenging iconography can be, especially for a computer who does not have an abstract idea of these transformations. Iconography is a loose tradition which splits in thousands of individual representations. Every image interprets the gospel in its own coeval view. We have individual characters, interactions and backgrounds. Into iconography implies going beyond the category iconography. However, we not only have individually staged plots of the life of Christ, we also have an inner complexity in every iconography. Here you can see two sequences. At the top, the individual choice of major scenes to represent the first chapters of the Gospels. At the bottom, a sequence of, I may say, shots of the same iconography. Into iconography means to differ between this temporality inside one scene. Understanding iconography, don't be afraid, I translate, in its complexity and manifold is a challenging problem even for human beings. In the introduction of her habilitation, Anna Greve describes how she, as a Colombian immigrant, was faced with Dutch genre paintings for the first time. I could not recognize neither single colors nor figures or blots, and definitely nothing fascinating in these things. End of quote. Which different approaches and steps do we have to solve the problem of iconography? First, I show the iterative search algorithm with the human in the loop we developed in Heidelberg. I make this very short because we will see a later presentation of Björn and Sabine. The user selects a certain part of the image. This is always the upper left. And the algorithm shows similar images. The user can evaluate these results, which trains the algorithm for the next round. As you can see, the algorithm finds duplicates of the same image, variations, and similar images. A specific object like the dove can therefore be shown in its various representations. This works also for the wings of the angel itself, always with some outliers. And it works also for compositions with a clear geometry, like the crucifixion. It is also possible to make more than one bounding box for the search. So, for example, you can mark two protagonists. This feature is an important semantic tool for using certain attributes of an iconography to detect the whole. However, you might have seen the style of a period or the appearance of a technique are dominating in the results. Yeah, you see that also here. To compare difference, like in the adoration of the Magi, we need much more information and abstract solutions of comparison. There are two phenomena which help us. First, algorithms and neural networks which are trained on photographs can also be used on art. We have seen examples like that here from Amazon. Because in many cases, art is not so different from photographic reproductions of our reality. The second helping phenomenon is that art is widely anthropocentric. It is a result of human perception and it is addressed to human perception. Also, there is a Hermetic art addressing exclusive circles. Most of Christian art is didactic and programmatically readable. And the main anthropocentrism in art is that it is focusing on humans constantly. Compositions and topics are mainly dealing with people, with the appearance of characters and the interactions. This means if we understand the protagonists of an image, we may understand about 80% of an image. Especially Christian iconography offers hardly representations without human beings. Human anatomy did not change much in the last 2,000 years, and so both phenomena could help us to understand iconography. So now I go on to with the parts with Leo and Pat. For the Annunciation and Baptism, we collected thousands of images from different repositories. The aim was not to create a fully representative data set, but a mixture of many periods, regions, techniques, and qualities. We gathered only about 900 images of the baptism because it shows only one central moment, whereas the Annunciation has at least 4 different stages. Yeah, you have seen this method. The pose recognition algorithm detects different limbs of the protagonists, here marked in different colors. These stick figures we can plot via TSNE. This means that a multidimensional comparison is reduced to a 2D plot of nearest neighbors. Here you can see all detected poses, and you also see clusters of similar poses. We then annotated Jesus, John, and other figures, and I now gray out anything but John. You can see a dense island of Johns. Where's the dense island? Yeah, here in the lower left, as well as a nearly John-free region at the bottom right, and some all over the place. If we zoom in to the dense John cluster, we see a very typical pose. The right arm is baptizing, the whole body leans a bit forward, sometimes in a contrapost. Even nearer, we see again the stylistic and periodic coherence as a result of the post. Renaissance on the right, Middle Age on the left. With Christ, we can make a similar, however not so clear observation. The clear clustering is motivated by the scene itself. Baptizing is a concrete gesture. The post had its own logic, and also the range of Christ is limited. Although the Annunciation has some items in common, it has a different temporality. Michael Baxendale refers to a Quattrocento sermon to define different stages in which Mary is confused, thinking, asking, and devoting herself under the will of God. Every stage is characterized by different gestures. Through the annotation process, we identified a fifth stage in which the angel is just arriving and Mary is still reading. The annotation of Mary's poses shows the conturbatio, this confusion as her main condition, which is also widespread. Only for the interrogation, a tendency can be shown. They are all down. But most of the poses seem not to be very significant for a stage. Putting the stages together, we see the difficulties even for experts to differ between the categories. Yeah, you see that also here. Also, we get no clear clustering for Mary. There seems to be some rules of her appearance, whereas the sometimes walking, sometimes flying Gabriel has an even bigger variety of movements. In this serendipity of poses, there are some regions of interest where Gabriel makes significant poses. Images never compared before are now composed to each other because of an abstract language of gestures and poses in a very Verboegian way. I think I leave that out with the text scrolls, but what we tried to get the temporality of the iconography by ordering the image in an optical flow, and observed that the stages are fluid with scenes between two stages and not fitting interactions. The image cannot be read as a movie. It's no linear narration, but a compression of prominent moments and attributes. The analysis of the poses gave us important information about the different aspects in one iconography and its representations. Further work will analyze how the composition arranges the figures. We want to understand the representations in the context of one precise moment, of one iconography, and also between different iconographies. We want to scale the iconographic analysis with metadata and a dense corpus of representations. For all these goals, easy and open access to huge image collections and metadata is necessary. Thus, we are really looking forward to cooperate with museums and photo archives. Thank you.